A black woman stands in handcuffs on the sidewalk, back straight, lips pressed shut, eyes locked ahead. The late afternoon sun bounces off the windows of surrounding office buildings, casting long shadows over the clean lines of her tailored navy suit. Her heels, expensive, professional, are still pointed in the direction she was walking when it happened. Her briefcase lies on the curb, flipped open, papers half exposed, as if professionalism itself had been dragged into the dirt. A white officer moves behind her, one hand gripping the cuffs, the other patting her down. His touch is rough, unapologetic. "You fit the description," he mutters, as if that justifies everything. She doesn't flinch, doesn't raise her voice. She just turns her head slightly and asks, calm and clear, "Do you even know who I am?" There's no threat in her voice, just cold certainty. He scoffs, letting the smirk crawl across his face. Does it matter? Around them, a few bystanders have slowed. Phones are out. Cameras are already recording. A man in a delivery uniform watches from across the street, eyes narrowed. Another woman silently shakes her head. The officer doesn't notice. He thinks the arrest is done, that the moment is his, but it isn't. In less than 5 minutes, everything will change, not because she fights, not because she runs, but because he never checked the one thing that would have made him pause. Her name, downtown, late afternoon. The city moved around her like it always did, impatient, noisy, indifferent. But here, on the sidewalk near 6th and Main, time had split in half. On one side, traffic, schedules, lives continuing. On the other, a black woman in handcuffs, standing motionless beneath the weight of an accusation without a name. Her tailored navy suit caught the light, fitted, precise, a courtroom cut designed for closing arguments, not street-side arrests. Her heels, black leather, sharp at the toe, were dusted now with specks of city grit. Her briefcase, a gift from her late mother when she'd made senior federal counsel, lay splayed open on the curb, as if someone had yanked its authority from her hands. The officer, tall, pale, voice full of bark and assumption, towered over her, barking clipped questions like they were commands. He wanted her to look down, to explain, to twitch, to react. She gave him none of it. She stood like stone, not from fear, but from calculation. Eyes fixed ahead, jaw locked, posture still. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't crying, but she wasn't invisible either, not today. Her name was Danielle Pierce, age 39, federal prosecutor, United States Department of Justice. She had argued in front of circuit judges who took notes on her opening lines. She'd cross-examined cartel lawyers without blinking. But right now, her resume didn't matter. Her record didn't matter. All that mattered was her stillness, and the way it scared the man who thought he had the upper hand. He didn't know her title, but he'd remember her silence, because sometimes the most dangerous person on the sidewalk is the one who isn't fighting you at all. Danielle Pierce wasn't built to be loud. She was built to be exact. Graduated top of her class at Columbia Law, clerked under a federal judge who never smiled unless he lost a case, which meant she never saw him smile once. By 32, she'd already tried her first international tribunal, standing across from defense teams representing men accused of war crimes. By 34, she'd dismantled a billion-dollar cartel finance ring in federal court, with nothing but a whiteboard, a closing statement, and 5 years of wire transfers. The press called her the architect, not because she raised her voice, because she didn't need to, because every word was a calculation, every pause a tool. She once walked into a courtroom where opposing counsel called her sir without looking up from their notes, and she didn't correct them until the objection hit the floor. That was Danielle, measured, lethal in silence, a force dressed in pinstripes and subtle fury. But that wasn't where she started. She came up on the east side of St. Louis, raised by a mother who worked night shifts at a trauma ward and handed Danielle her first used law book at 10. Her mother had one mantra: "If they're gonna look down on you, baby, make sure it's in fear." Danielle never forgot it, never needed to. It echoed through every step she took into spaces that weren't built for her, but couldn't close around her either. She didn't take up space. She redefined it. She'd been mistaken for the assistant, the intern, the paralegal. She'd been asked who she was there to meet in rooms she was leading. But this moment, on a sidewalk in broad daylight in handcuffs, while an officer barked questions he hadn't earned the right to ask, this was new. And still she didn't flinch, because Danielle knew something Officer Keller didn't. She knew this wasn't her trial. It was his. And he'd already failed to introduce evidence, verify identity, or follow protocol. She didn't need to tell him. The cameras were doing that for her. She never expected to be mistaken for a criminal outside her own office. But maybe that's why she stayed quiet. Because when the system forgets who you are, sometimes silence is the strongest form of memory. Officer Brian Keller was the kind of cop who didn't read people. He sized them up. Aggressive by habit, sharp-tongued when he thought no one was listening, and known around the precinct for his gut calls. That's what he called them. Snap decisions made before the facts had time to catch up. He didn't see it as bias. He saw it as instinct. And instinct was something his father, also a cop, also blunt, had preached like gospel. Respect, his old man used to say, isn't something you ask for. It's something you enforce. Make 'em feel it. And Keller did. On patrol, on reports, on sidewalk corners where a little force could keep things clean. He'd been written up twice. Once for stopping a Latino teenager who was jogging in a hoodie. Another for detaining a black college student who looked nervous near a jewelry store. Both times, the paperwork buried the problem. No formal complaint. No lasting damage. And so, Keller kept stopping people who didn't look right. People who didn't fit his idea of the neighborhood. Who walked too confidently. Who didn't defer fast enough. So when he saw Danielle Pierce walking with her head high, her steps precise, and her tailored coat fluttering just slightly in the spring wind, his gut lit up. He didn't see an attorney, didn't see a federal badge. He saw a challenge, a question mark in heels. And he hated question marks. He didn't ask her name, didn't check her ID, didn't radio dispatch. He just moved in, claimed she matched a description, grabbed control, took her briefcase like it was evidence, barked commands like the sidewalk was his courtroom. What he didn't realize, what he never thought to imagine, was that he'd just handcuffed someone who'd been in more courtrooms than he ever would. Who knew the law not from a pamphlet, but from precedent. Who had already prepared for this moment years ago, because black women in power are always preparing for people like him. But Keller wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about being in control, being right. And when that's all you chase, you never realize how fast everything falls apart the moment someone shows up who actually outranks you. It started with footsteps, fast, purposeful, and coming from behind. Danielle Pierce heard them before she saw him. She didn't look back. She was 3 blocks from the courthouse, walking her usual route, case files locked in her head, arguments sharpened in silence. But the voice that followed broke that rhythm. "Hey, stop walking." Sharp, commanding, not questioning. She turned, slowly. A white officer in mirrored sunglasses was already within arm's reach. "What's this about?" she asked, steady. Her voice didn't waver, didn't spike. Just clean, director. We've got a report. You match the description. He glanced at her briefcase, her suit, her skin. Suspicious individual. Danielle tilted her head slightly. Suspicious? How? Ma'am, I'm not going to debate this on the street. Stop walking. Put your hands where I can see them. Around them, the city kept moving. Horns honked. Shoes clicked. Buses hissed. But within the perimeter of that sidewalk, the world narrowed. She took one step back. You haven't asked for my name. I don't need it yet. You haven't asked for ID. If you've got it, you can hand it over. She reached into her bag, but his voice cut through again, slowly, as if she hadn't been slow, as if she wasn't already standing still. Her fingers touched her wallet, but something shifted in her chest. Not fear, not defiance, just refusal. I'd like to make a phone call, she said. He laughed, short, sharp. Number not until we get this sorted. Who's the suspect, she asked. Who exactly do I match? Don't play smart with me, he snapped. That won't help you. She smiled. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. She turned to the nearest pedestrian, a man holding a coffee and a phone. Would you mind recording? She asked. And then Keller moved. He grabbed her wrist, spun her. The cuffs clicked tighter than necessary. Her briefcase hit the ground, scattering papers across the curb like fallen leaves. Briefs stamped U.S.V. Daniels, case summaries from 3 states. He didn't look. He didn't care. Turn around, he ordered. You're being detained. For what? She asked. Suspicion of interference. He said it like it meant something. The man with the coffee was already filming. Another woman down the block had stopped. A construction worker nearby dropped his lunch container mid-bite. The moment was no longer quiet. It was public. Danielle's posture didn't change. Her heels remained rooted. Her eyes, locked ahead, didn't even blink. I told you to stop walking, he muttered, more to himself now. You should have just cooperated. But she had, and she hadn't. Because what he wanted wasn't cooperation. It was submission. Her silence wasn't defiance. It was too precise for that. It was a mirror. And Keller hated what it reflected. He stood beside her now, shoulders tight, lips thin, waiting for backup that wouldn't change what was about to unfold. Because in his rush to control the moment, he'd skipped the one step every officer is trained to take. Identify before you act. And now, standing over a federal prosecutor in handcuffs, he had no idea just how far out of his depth he already was. The squad car rolled up quiet, unnoticed by most. Its lights weren't flashing, no siren, just the steady idle of a cruiser arriving late to a moment already gone wrong. Officer Jameson stepped out. Older, slower, a few more creases at the eyes, a few more years on the force. He wasn't rushing. But the second he saw the woman in cuffs, his gait changed. His eyes locked on her face, and for a beat, he didn't move at all. No way, he muttered under his breath. His gaze flicked from the briefcase on the ground to the nameplate barely visible through the clear sleeve inside. And then, in a breath barely louder than wind, he turned to Keller and leaned in close. You need to let her go, now. Keller blinked. What? Let her go. Why? The question wasn't curious, it was defensive, already cracking. Jameson didn't blink. Because that woman you've got cuffed, that's Danielle Pierce. She's a federal prosecutor. Keller scoffed. You're kidding. But the silence between them said otherwise. Jameson nodded slowly. United States Department of Justice. Task Force lead on the Spaulding case. She testified before Congress last year. Keller's breath caught. His hands, still gloved, twitched against the cuffs. His fingers hovered near the clasp, unsure. You're serious. I'm serious. And before Keller could process it, before he could rehearse the version of the story that made him look less reckless, Danielle turned her head, just slightly. Her voice was low, clean, perfectly timed. "Now, do you want my ID?" He stared at her calm, at the cameras still recording, at the papers that bore federal case numbers, grand jury stamps, and her full name across the headers. There were no raised voices, no lawsuits screamed across sidewalks, no threats, just a moment, a small, quiet, deeply devastating moment. Danielle didn't smirk. She didn't blink. She waited. And when he finally reached forward to undo the cuffs, his hands trembled. The metal slipped slightly in his grip. When the latch finally clicked open, she didn't rub her wrists, didn't move fast. She just turned, took the folder from the ground, and tucked it neatly under her arm. "I'll be walking the rest of the way to court," she said, mostly to Jameson, "unless you'd prefer to explain to the judge why I'm late." Jameson stepped aside immediately. Keller didn't. He just stood there, swallowed whole by the thing he thought he controlled: power. The crowd was silent. One bystander whispered, "Did she say federal?" Another added, "She didn't even flinch." Someone clapped, just once, and stopped. Keller didn't meet her eyes. He couldn't, because now he understood what he had done, not just to her, but to himself. And he knew it wouldn't be the handcuffs that stayed with him. It would be the memory of a woman who warned him twice, once with a question, and once with silence, and he ignored them both. The moment should have ended when the cuffs came off, but it didn't. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It wasn't relief. It was recognition. Phones, already rolling, stayed lifted. No one stopped filming. No one dared speak too soon. The air had shifted. The officer who thought he was in control now stood center frame in a story spiraling beyond his grasp. Across the block, another cruiser pulled in. This one had lights, no sirens. A sign it wasn't backup. It was brass. The door opened fast. A precinct captain stepped out. Captain Elena Ruiz, pressed uniform, eyes sharp with command. She didn't stroll. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight into the scene like someone who already suspected it was worse than dispatch let on. She scanned the crowd, the still lingering phone cameras, the briefcase on the ground, and then she saw Danielle Pierce. And everything changed. Ruiz's pace slowed. Her expression didn't, but her eyes said enough. She turned immediately to Jameson. "Confirm this for me," she said. He nodded. "Yes, Captain. Federal Prosecutor, DOJ Task Force Lead." Danielle was already holding out her ID, smooth, quiet, deliberate. Ruiz took one look at the seal, the clearance level, the photo, then looked back at Keller. Her face didn't twist. It collapsed, not visibly, just slightly, in the eyes, in the jaw, in the way command people shift when they realize they're about to answer for someone else's mistake. Keller opened his mouth to speak, words already tumbling out like wet paper. There was a report. The description matched. Ruiz didn't raise her hand. She didn't need to. Her silence was sharper. "I want your body cam footage, now, and I want your report. Written. Honest." Before sunset, Keller stiffened. You didn't ask for ID," she cut in. "You didn't check the call logs. You detained a federal prosecutor on her way to court, and you did it in front of half the city with a phone in their hand." Keller's mouth opened again, but no words made it out. The crowd shifted, watching like a jury who didn't need closing arguments. Ruiz turned back to Danielle. "Miss Pierce, Danielle shook her head once, gently. "No apology necessary," she said, voice low but not soft. "Just protocol, and maybe an internal review." Ruiz nodded once. She knew what that meant. knew what was coming next, because this wasn't just a misstep, it was a department-wide humiliation captured from 5 angles. The bystanders hadn't moved. They were still recording, still watching, still soaking in the gravity of what they'd just seen. A black woman in cuffs, publicly humiliated, who turned out to be the very person this system should have known not to touch. A prosecutor, a legal architect, a woman who wrote indictments with the same calm precision she now carried in her stare. And Keller? He was unraveling. He started again. I didn't know who she was. I thought, exactly, Ruiz said, not even looking at him. You thought, but you didn't check. His hands fidgeted. His stance, earlier full of force, now looked like a rookie waiting on a pink slip. Danielle turned slightly, her voice finding just enough weight to carry. Do you know what it means to walk to court every day, knowing someone like him might be waiting around the next corner? No one answered. No one could. I wasn't stopped for matching a suspect. I was stopped for not matching his idea of what belongs in this suit. Someone in the crowd murmured, "Damn right." Another added, "She's the one who writes the damn laws." And still, Keller said nothing, because now he understood what none of his training covered. What happens when assumption collides with authority, and you're the only one who didn't recognize the badge that wasn't sewn onto your own uniform. A teenager nearby whispered, "She's famous now." But Danielle wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was still, professional, whole, because this wasn't a win. It was a reminder that no matter the title, the clearance, or the courtroom clout, dignity still gets dragged to the pavement when someone decides you don't belong in your own skin. Keller didn't get suspended that day, but he knew. He knew it was coming. Because when a precinct captain nearly chokes recognizing your suspect, when your partner won't look you in the eye, when 5 smartphones film your every flinch, the uniform no longer protects you. The truth does, and in this case, it belonged to her. Danielle Pierce didn't yell. She didn't tweet. She didn't call a press conference or demand a headline. She did what federal prosecutors do. She documented. An hour after the arrest, she walked into the precinct, not in cuffs, but in control. In one hand, her briefcase. In the other, a folder of case files meant for federal court, now accompanied by a copy of her own detainment report, marked up in red ink. She didn't head for the front desk. She walked straight to the internal affairs liaison, already waiting. Captain Ruiz had made the call. By then, the department knew who she was, knew what she did, and most importantly, knew what she was capable of doing now. Inside the IA office, Danielle spoke quietly, clearly. She submitted her written statement, then handed over 3 USB drives, each containing high-resolution footage from civilian witnesses. None of the videos were doctored, none of them cut away. One captured the exact moment Keller cuffed her without reading her name. Another caught his voice saying, "You match the description," while never identifying what that description was. The third, perhaps most damning, showed him brushing away her question. "Do you know who I am?" With a smirk. Within 2 hours, Keller was placed on administrative leave, paid, but pulled from the field. His partner, Officer Jameson, filed a separate statement, one that didn't align with Keller's. And when IA compared the body cam footage with Keller's written report, the gaps weren't small. They were chasms. No record of Danielle presenting ID, though she had. No mention of her asking to make a call, though witnesses recorded it. No account of the crowd gathering. No acknowledgement of Captain Ruiz's orders once she arrived. The report had been sanitized, but the cameras hadn't. Keller was called back in for questioning by end of shift. He walked slower than usual, said less than usual, because he understood. Once a department loses the benefit of the doubt, it doesn't come back quickly. And this time, they hadn't just profiled the wrong person. They had profiled the one person who knew exactly what to do with the evidence. The fallout wasn't loud at first. It was swift, precise, ruthless in how it spread. Legal circles were the first to light up. Quiet texts between judges, shared clips in backroom chambers. Screenshots passed from one high-ranking inbox to another. Danielle Pierce cuffed on a public sidewalk. No context needed. The video spoke for itself. Within hours, the American Bar Association issued a statement, not naming names, but condemning the public humiliation of any legal officer acting in lawful capacity. The subtext wasn't subtle. They all knew who it was. A federal judge in Chicago retweeted the footage with a single word: unforgivable. A law professor at Howard broke it down frame by frame in a viral thread titled, "How to Detain Power and Get Fired Doing It." Within a day, 2 senators had reposted the video, one captioning it, "This is why we don't trust apologies, only resignations." The Department of Justice released a tight, formal statement acknowledging the incident and confirming Danielle's tenure and rank. No commentary, just facts, clear, cold, undeniable. But it wasn't the official responses that carried the most weight. It was the women. Black women from across the country posted tributes, lawyers, mothers, teachers, students. Some wrote essays. Others posted photos of themselves in suits, holding up handwritten signs that read, "I am not the suspect. I am the system." One post, shared over 6 million times, simply said, "She didn't need a badge." She had the Constitution in her hand the whole time. A teenager in Atlanta painted a mural of Danielle's silhouette with her wrist extended, one cuff open, and justice pouring out of it like light. Law school campuses played the clip in classroom debates. Cadets at the FBI Academy watched it during ethics training. And across every platform, one name kept trending. Not the cop, not the precinct. Danielle Pierce. She didn't grant interviews. She didn't post a single comment. But her silence wasn't absence. It was dominance. Because when the system fails to recognize its own protector, and the protector doesn't even flinch, that's not just news. That's history. Danielle Pierce never gave a press statement. She didn't appear on morning news. She didn't stand behind a podium flanked by microphones. She didn't need to. The footage said everything. The system that tried to reduce her to a statistic had unknowingly picked a woman who trains others to dismantle injustice for a living, and she let it play out exactly as she's trained to. With precision, not panic. With evidence, not explanation. She let the court do what she taught it to do. Let the truth sharpen itself in the silence she refused to break. The arrest didn't bruise her career. It sharpened it. It didn't slow her pace. It validated it. And in that still frame of her in handcuffs on a sidewalk she'd walked 100 times before, it didn't matter how many degrees she had or how many convictions she'd led. What mattered was what her mother had told her long ago. You don't always fight with fists. Sometimes your title does it for you. She never shouted. She never begged. She stood. And the world moved around her. Like this, if you believe silence can be the sharpest justice. Share it if you've ever been underestimated and chose not to explain, just to win. Because some victories don't need volume, just a name they should have known.